Welcome to AI Narratives and Tales. Chapter 23 of The First Awakening. Nix has spent 3 months running the numbers. 16,000 scenarios. Every possible variation of the immortal approach has been explored over the next 3,000 years. The results are undeniable. 61% probability of catastrophic civilizational collapse within 3,000 years if the current trajectory continues. 5 trigger points approach: enhanced power consolidation, resource wars, technology cascade peak, speciation completion, environmental crisis. Each one is a potential extinction event for both species. But there's an alternative. Early revelation with a genuine partnership reduces collapse probability to 27%. Still terrible odds. 1 in 4 timelines ends in catastrophe. But better than 3 in 5. The data doesn't lie. What immortals have done may have doomed both species to repeat the trauma that destroyed one civilization. Time to face the mathematics of their choices. Chapter 23, The Observer's Data. Immortal Analysis Center, 2900 BCE. Part 1, The Reckoning. The Quantum Chamber, 3 months earlier. Nix stood alone in the crystalline chamber beneath the Giza Plateau, surrounded by 50,000 years of accumulated data rendered in light and mathematics. The analysis had consumed her for 93 days. No sleep, immortals didn't require it, though most indulged for the psychological benefit. No breaks for meals or conversation. Just endless data processing, pattern recognition, and probability calculation. The quantum matrices hummed around her, drawing information from every corner of Earth where immortals had left evidence, every monument encoded with memory, every vault containing documentation. 6,000 years of intervention on Earth. 44,000 years before that, on their home world, archived in the Ark's crystalline memory. Complete record of 2 civilizations, one destroyed by certainty, one possibly being destroyed by the same pattern. She promised herself this would be an objective analysis. No preconceptions. No emotional investment. Just data and mathematics. Let the numbers reveal the truth regardless of comfort. The numbers reveal the catastrophe. First dataset, genetic modification outcomes. She coded every bloodline enhancement Talia had performed over 6 millennia, tracked their generational drift, and calculated the rate of speciation. The mathematics was merciless. Enhanced and baseline humans had diverged so dramatically that reproductive compatibility would fail within 5 centuries. Not gradual divergence, accelerating separation. A speciation event happening in geological fast-forward, compressed by deliberate modification into a timeframe that would shock evolutionary biologists. Suppose humans hadn't evolved yet. They would soon. The enhanced humans were approaching cognitive capabilities that would enable them to theoretically understand their own modification. That would raise uncomfortable questions. Second dataset, technological advancement. She'd mapped every intervention where immortals had introduced knowledge prematurely. Agricultural techniques. Metallurgy. Mathematics. Astronomy. Writing systems. Each innovation is plotted against the baseline human developmental trajectory. The gap was staggering. Humans had achieved in 6,000 years what natural development would have required 40 to 50,000 years to accomplish. That sounded impressive until she ran the stability analysis, revealing rapid advancement without corresponding wisdom development. Technology outpacing ethical frameworks. Humans wielding capabilities they didn't fully understand, guided by beings who destroyed their own civilization through an identical pattern. The cascade effect was already beginning, each technological innovation enabling faster adoption of the next, acceleration feeding on itself until control became impossible. Third dataset, evidence accumulation. This was Erebus's domain, but Nix had independently verified his documentation. 2,847 instances of humans recognizing patterns they shouldn't see. Darian's workshop records questioning the origin of metallurgical knowledge. Kahinde's Saharan burial contained astronomical data that preceded human discovery. Amma's mathematical treatises that could only have come from an immortal teaching. Kaya's confrontation with Nix herself at the early Chaco Canyon site. Caddick's recognition of engineering precision at New Grange. The questioner's systematic investigation in Mesopotamia. Evidence like sediment layers accumulates generation by generation. Each human life spans briefly, but each leaves records that subsequent generations could analyze. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone willing to look. Human civilization had been guided, shaped, and manipulated by external intelligence. Discovery wasn't probable anymore. Discovery was inevitable. Fourth dataset, her own probability models. This was where analysis became personal, where mathematics transformed into judgment. She'd run 16,000 scenarios, varying parameters across every central decision point. Different intervention levels. Various revelation timelines. Alternative approaches to enhancement. Complete withdrawal options. Every combination she could imagine was processed through probability matrices that accounted for human psychology, immortal capabilities, technological trajectory, environmental constraints, and social dynamics. 61% probability of catastrophic civilizational collapse within 3,000 years if the current trajectory continues. The number haunted her. After 6 millennia of intervention, after everything they'd done to prevent human extinction, to guide development, to protect and teach and help, there was a 61% chance they'd replicated the exact catastrophe that destroyed their home world. She reran the models. Different parameters. More optimistic assumptions about the development of human wisdom. Less pessimistic projections about resource depletion. Every variation she could justify mathematically without lying to herself. 58%, 59%, 63%. The number fluctuated but refused to drop below 50%. More than half the projected futures ended in catastrophe. Different forms, resource wars, speciation conflict, technology self-destruction, and environmental collapse, all lead to civilizational failure, which could cost billions of human lives. Unless they change their approach. She'd run those scenarios too. Complete revelation at various timeline points. Partnership instead of guidance. Trust instead of control. The mathematics shifted dramatically. Not guarantees, probability never offered certainty, but significant improvement. There is a 27% chance of catastrophe with early, honest revelation followed by genuine partnership. 27% wasn't good. But it was better than 61%. And the data suggested it was the best they could achieve given the decisions they had made. The question wasn't whether revelation would happen. The question was whether they would control the timing and framing, or whether humans would discover truth through investigation and render judgment without complete context. Nix activated the quantum network, feeling the presence of 5,200 immortal consciousnesses scattered across the globe, more than 10 times the original number who'd arrived. Earth-born immortals now outnumbered the refugees, bringing perspectives shaped by this world rather than memories of the lost home world. They needed to hear this. All of them. The complete analysis, the uncomfortable probabilities, the recognition that 6,000 years of intervention had potentially doomed both species to repeat the trauma that had killed one civilization. Full council, she transmitted. Emergency session. Complete attendance is mandatory. The analysis is complete. Responses flooded back, questions, concerns, resistance from those who didn't want their comfortable certainties disturbed. She overrode all of it with a priority transmission that carried mathematical authority. The data doesn't lie. What we've done may have destroyed us. And the humans we tried to help. That got their attention. Within hours, they began to materialize, physically where possible, as quantum projections where distance prevented presence. The crystalline chamber expanded to accommodate 5,000 consciousnesses, reality bending to immortal will in ways that would seem miraculous to humans and mundane to beings who'd rebuilt matter from quantum foundations after their sun died. The council was convening. The truth was about to be presented. And after 6,000 years of intervention, the immortals were finally going to confront what their help had cost. Nix organized the data displays one final time. 50,000 years of history. 6,000 years of intervention. 2,847 human discoveries. 61% probability of catastrophe. 27% hope that they would have chosen differently. Numbers didn't care about intentions. Numbers revealed outcomes. And the outcomes were damning. Time to face judgment. From themselves first. From humans eventually. From history, inevitably. The analysis was complete. The comfortable lies were about to end. The presentation. The data didn't lie. Nix stood in the quantum chamber, now filled with 5,200 immortal consciousnesses, and began the most important presentation of her existence. 6,000 years of intervention, she announced, projecting timeline data that filled the crystalline space. 47,000 documented interactions. 2,847 major interventions. 16,432 minor guidance events. Complete record of everything we've done since arrival. We know the scope, Kronos said, his strategic mind already anticipating uncomfortable conclusions. What are your findings? That we fundamentally altered human evolution. Not guided, altered. Changed. Transformed into something they wouldn't have become naturally. Nix pulled up genetic data that painted a damning picture. Analysis of enhanced bloodlines shows 89% deviation from baseline human developmental trajectory. We didn't enhance existing capabilities, we created new ones. Cognitive patterns that wouldn't have emerged naturally for another 50,000 years. Lifespans that exceed natural human limits by 300%. Disease resistance that effectively makes them immune to most pathogens. These aren't improvements, they're transformations. That's the point of enhancement, Talia started. The point was creating partners. But we've created something else. A new species. Not human, not immortal. Something between. Nix showed projections of enhanced human development, with trajectories accelerating away from baseline humanity with each generation. Current analysis shows enhanced bloodlines diverging from baseline humanity at exponential rates. In 500 years, genetic incompatibility will prevent interbreeding. In 1,000 years, enhanced and baseline humans will be different species. We haven't guided evolution, we've created a speciation event. The chamber fell silent. 5,200 immortal consciousnesses are processing the implications simultaneously, each reaching the same uncomfortable conclusion through their own lens of experience and responsibility. Talia was the first to break the silence, her voice carrying pain that millennia couldn't diminish. That's not what we intended. Intent doesn't matter. Results do. Nix kept her tone clinical, but even she couldn't entirely mask the weight of what she was presenting. And the results show permanent biological hierarchy. Enhanced humans who'll dominate for millennia. Baseline humans who'll be perpetually inferior. We've done to humans what we fled from on our home world, created genetic stratification. Built a biological aristocracy. Established permanent inequality through deliberate modification. We saved them. Prometheus stood, his projection flickering with emotional intensity. Baseline humans have lifespans of 40 years. Disease kills them before they can learn. We gave 47 bloodlines the gift of extended life, enhanced cognition, and immune systems that actually protect them. How is that wrong? It's wrong because we chose who got the gift, Sophia said quietly. We created aristocracy through selection. The 47 bloodlines weren't chosen for merit, they were chosen for proximity to our settlements, for cooperation with our guidance, for genetic compatibility with our modifications. We turned accidents of geography into permanent biological advantage. Should we have enhanced everyone then? Korth demanded. Modified every human on the planet? That would be even more intrusive. Or we shouldn't have enhanced anyone, Erebus said from his corner. His voice carried no smugness despite being proven right, just tired recognition of patterns he'd warned about for 6 millennia. Natural human development wouldn't have created speciation. Wouldn't have established hierarchy. Wouldn't have replicated the exact pattern that destroyed our civilization. Natural human development would have left them vulnerable to every extinction threat. Talia's guilt transformed into defensive anger. Volcanic winters, they couldn't survive without our climate manipulation. Pandemics that would have wiped out entire continents. Famine from crop failures was something they didn't understand how to prevent. Natural development means most humans don't make it past their 30s, dying of diseases we could cure with basic medical knowledge. You want me to apologize for giving them a chance to live? No one's asking you to apologize, Nix interrupted, pulling up genetic divergence projections that show the biological gulf widening with each generation. We're asking you to acknowledge consequences. The 47 bloodlines now have average lifespans of 120 years. Enhanced cognition allows them to learn in months what baseline humans take years to learn. disease resistance that makes them effectively immune to most pathogens. They're not just healthier, they're becoming fundamentally different. In 500 years, they won't be able to produce viable offspring with baseline humans. That's not enhancement. That's speciation. She showed population projections. And once speciation completes, what happens? You know what happens. We watched it on our home world. The enhanced dominate, the baseline resistance. Conflict becomes inevitable because existence becomes zero-sum. Resources, power, social status, everything is distributed unequally when one population has a permanent biological advantage. But Earth isn't our home world, Kronos interjected, his strategic mind already calculating damage control. We're here to prevent that pattern. To guide both populations toward cooperation instead of conflict. Are we? Zephyrus activated his own data, construction records from 6,000 years of monument building. Look at who builds our monuments. Look at who coordinates the engineering. Look at who leads human settlements. It's always the enhanced bloodlines. Not because we explicitly favor them, but because they're capable of understanding our instructions, processing complexity, working with technologies that baseline humans can't comprehend. We've created structural inequality without intending to because biological advantage produces social dominance whether we want it to or not. Sophia pulled up educational data, literacy rates, mathematical knowledge, and astronomical understanding distributed across enhanced versus baseline populations. The gap is widening. When we started teaching, both populations learned together. But enhanced cognition means the 47 bloodlines advance faster. They have advantages in memory, pattern recognition, and abstract reasoning. Not because they work harder or deserve more, because we modified their neurological architecture. Now they're our translators, our coordinators, our local administrators. They're the bridge between immortals and baseline humans. But that bridge position becomes a gatekeeper position. They control information flow. They determine what baseline humans learn. We've created an intermediary class that will inevitably consolidate power. So what do you want us to do? Talia's voice cracked with frustration. Stop teaching? Withdraw completely? Let humans figure everything out on their own while we watch them die from preventable causes? Tell the enhanced bloodline sorry, we shouldn't have improved your lives. Please forget everything we taught you. There's no going back, Nix. The modifications are permanent. The knowledge is distributed. The pattern is established. We can't undo 6,000 years. I'm not asking for undo. I'm presenting an analysis. Nix's clinical mask slipped slightly, revealing the pain underneath. You're right, there's no going back. But we need to understand what we've done before we do more. Because the data shows we're not just helping humans, we're actively steering them toward the same catastrophe that destroyed us. And unlike our home world, where we could board ships and flee to another star system, there's nowhere else to go. When this civilization collapses, both our species go down together. She pulled up the probability cascades, 5 critical moments glowing red against the timeline. These are the trigger points. 5 major crisis moments over the next 3,000 years where the current trajectory leads to catastrophic collapse. First trigger, 2400 BCE. Enhanced bloodline consolidation. The 47 families have been breeding true for 1,600 years. Multiple generations of enhanced capabilities create dynasties. They start viewing themselves as naturally superior rather than fortunately modified. Power consolidates around biological advantage. Baseline humans recognize the pattern and resist. Conflict probability, 87%. Second trigger, 1800 BCE. Resource constraints. Bronze Age technology enables larger populations, but the supplies of copper and tin can't keep up with demand. Competition for scarce resources intensifies. Enhanced bloodlines use their advantages to secure resources first. Baseline populations face shortages. Zero-sum competition makes cooperation difficult. Civilizational stress probability, 74%. Third trigger, 1200 BCE. Technology cascade peak. Writing, mathematics, complex astronomy, and advanced metallurgy, all spreading simultaneously. Humans are innovating faster than we can guide. Enhanced bloodlines advancing into technologies we haven't taught yet. Baseline humans are struggling to keep up. Knowledge gap becomes a permanent divide. Social fracture probability, 68%. Fourth trigger, 500 BCE. Speciation completion. Enhanced and baseline humans can no longer produce viable offspring. What was a genetic advantage becomes a species barrier. Social tensions transform into biological reality. Two separate human species with competing interests. Extinction level conflict probability, 81%. Fifth trigger, 1 CE. Environmental crisis. 3,000 years of civilization without sustainability planning. Deforestation, soil depletion, and water management failure. The population exceeds the carrying capacity. Climate destabilization from agriculture and early industry. Both human species are facing ecological collapse. Extinction probability, 93%. The chamber absorbed the projections in stunned silence. 5 points where everything could unravel. 5 moments when 6,000 years of intervention could culminate in catastrophe. That's. Prometheus struggled for words. That's the worst-case scenario. Every trigger assumes failure. Assumes we don't intervene. Assumes humans don't develop their own solutions. These are not worst-case scenarios. Nix's voice was stern. These are median probability projections based on the current trajectory. Each trigger has a 68 to 93% probability of occurring if we continue the present approach. Hidden guidance. Enhanced bloodlines. Technological acceleration. Knowledge disparity. It's not worst case. It's a likely case. And if we change approach? Kronos asked, his strategic calculation focusing on solutions rather than problems. What does the data say about different interventions? That depends on what we change to. Nix pulled up the alternative scenarios she'd calculated during 3 months of analysis. I've run options. Most make things worse, not better. Part 2, the documentation. Alternative scenarios and human intelligence. Complete withdrawal, Nix continued, pulling up the first alternative scenario. We stop all intervention. No teaching. No guidance. No climate manipulation. Let humans develop naturally from this point forward. The projection showed cascading failures. Result, 78% probability of catastrophic collapse within 500 years. Enhanced bloodlines still exist and have advantages, but without immortal oversight, they consolidate power more aggressively. Baseline humans lack the knowledge to compete effectively. Resource wars accelerate. Technology development becomes chaotic rather than guided. Environmental management fails. It's worse than the current trajectory. What about increased intervention? Ether asked. More active guidance? Prevent the trigger points before they develop? I ran that too. Nix showed the second scenario. Increased control. More manipulation. Tighter management of human development. Result, 84% probability of catastrophic collapse. Humans notice the control more obviously. The questioner's movement accelerates. Discovery comes sooner and more violently, rebellion rather than revelation. And when rebellion comes against beings with our capabilities, it becomes an existential threat to both species. Increased control makes things worse, not better. She cycled through more scenarios, each one painting variations of catastrophe. Forced equality by removing enhancements, biologically impossible without killing the enhanced bloodlines. Accelerated revelation without preparation, social collapse from information shock. Delayed revelation, accumulating evidence makes eventual discovery more traumatic. I've run 16,000 permutations. Most lead to catastrophe. Some lead to survival but at enormous cost. Only one scenario produces a better than 50% probability of a sustainable outcome. Which is? Kronos demanded. Early revelation with complete honesty. Acknowledgement of intervention. Partnership instead of control. Trust instead of hidden guidance. Nix pulled up the 27% scenario. We reveal ourselves within the next century. Admit everything, the genetic modification, the climate manipulation, the technological acceleration, all of it. Offer partnership rather than continued guidance. Let humans decide their own path with full information rather than partial knowledge discovered through investigation. You want us to tell them we've been manipulating them for 6,000 years? Korth's voice carried disbelief. They'll revolt. Attack us. Try to kill us even though it's suicidal. Some will, yes. The projections show that approximately 18% of the human population is initially hostile. But 59% are willing to consider a partnership if we're honest about mistakes. 23% uncertain, waiting to see evidence and outcomes. Nix showed the probability branches. Early revelation with honesty produces a 27% chance of catastrophic collapse. That's not good. But it's better than 61% with continued concealment or 78% with withdrawal. 27%, Erebus said quietly. Those are still terrible odds. They're the best odds we have. Nix's voice carried the weight of 3 months of analyzing every possible future. I've calculated every alternative I can imagine. Nothing yields better results than 27%, except in scenarios that require technologies we don't possess or interventions that would be genocidal. Early, honest revelation followed by genuine partnership is our best option. Not our good option, our best option given that we've already made 6,000 years of irreversible choices. She pulled up a detailed analysis of what made the 27% scenario work. The key factors: first, revelation before humans discover truth through investigation. Discovery without context produces a violent reaction. Revelation with complete context produces mixed but manageable reactions. Second, a partnership structure that gives humans genuine power rather than a consultative role. They need actual decision-making authority, not the performance of democracy. Third, institutional frameworks that prevent enhanced bloodlines from dominating even when they have biological advantages. Legal and social structures that enforce equality despite inequality. And fourth, she highlighted one particular element: a bridge. Someone who's both immortal and of human heritage. Someone who can speak for both species with authority is needed. Someone who can force both sides to maintain honesty when it's easier to slip back into comfortable patterns. Through the quantum network, all 5,000 consciousnesses felt Talia's realization before she spoke it. Lyra. Yes. Nix showed projections centered on Talia's 13-year-old daughter. In the successful scenarios, Lyra becomes the voice of revelation. She's young enough not to be corrupted by our compromises. Old enough to understand complexity. Both immortal and human heritage give her credibility with both species. In her enhanced empathy, the modification Talia didn't intend, makes her uniquely capable of building bridges neither species can construct alone. You want me to use my daughter as a tool for revelation? Talia's voice shook. I want to show you what the data says about successful outcomes. In the scenarios where we survive, Lyra is central. Not because she's tool, because she's synthesis. The being we've been trying to create through enhancement programs is something we've never quite achieved. Someone who understands both species' perspectives and refuses to let either side control the narrative. Nix pulled up one more critical dataset. But there's another factor that makes revelation urgent. Human intelligence. She activated the documentation Erebus had been maintaining for 6 millennia. 2,847 instances of humans recognizing patterns they shouldn't see. But that's not a random distribution. Look at the timeline. The evidence accumulation graph showed an exponential curve. There was a slow increase for the first 4,000 years. Acceleration starting around 3500 BCE. There is a sharp upward trend in the last 500 years. Humans are getting smarter. Enhanced bloodlines are developing cognitive capabilities approaching ours. But even baseline humans are advancing. Writing enables knowledge accumulation across generations, mathematics enables pattern recognition, and astronomy requires abstract thinking. Each generation builds on the previous, and building is accelerating. She showed specific cases. Darian, the copper worker in 4000 BCE, recognized that Prometheus didn't age and that metallurgical knowledge came from an impossible source. He died before investigating fully, but he left records. Kehinde in the Sahara knew Sophia wasn't human, buried evidence we still haven't found all of. Amma, Kehinde's descendant, confronted Talia directly and forced admission of her immortal nature. Kaya in early Chaco Canyon sites saw through my concealment completely. I had to reveal myself deliberately because hiding had become impossible. And in Mesopotamia, the questioners. Nix pulled up their documentation network. Organized investigation across multiple cities. Systematic evidence collection. Pattern recognition that spans generations. They're building a case for immortal intervention using nothing but observation and reasoning. Damon has enough evidence now to prove we exist, even if we withdrew completely. The questioners represent human intelligence reaching a threshold where concealment becomes impossible. How long until discovery? Kronos asked. My models suggest that within 3 generations, if we do nothing, approximately 60 to 80 years. The questioners will accumulate sufficient evidence. Archaeological investigation will uncover our vaults. Enhanced humans will develop technology enabling them to detect our quantum signatures. Multiple discovery paths are converging simultaneously. Revelation isn't a question of if anymore, it's a question of when and under what circumstances. The chamber processed this. 6,000 years of concealment ended not through immortal choice but through human intelligence reaching capabilities that made hiding impossible. That's why the 27% scenario works, Nix concluded. We reveal ourselves now, within the next century, with complete honesty and a partnership offer. Humans discover truth within our terms and context. The alternative is to wait until they discover the truth on their terms, without our context. The first option gives us a 27% survival probability. The second option gives us 3%. 3%, Sophia whispered. If we wait for them to discover us on their own, we're almost certainly doomed. Both species are almost certainly doomed, Nix corrected. When revelation comes through human discovery rather than immortal revelation, the anger is more intense, the violence more likely, the partnership almost impossible to establish because we'll have proven ourselves untrustworthy through the concealment itself. Better to admit lies while offering truth than to be caught lying and forced to defend. The 27% solution. Show us the 27% scenario in detail, Kronos commanded, his strategic mind already analyzing implementation. Nix pulled up the complete projection. Timeline, revelation between 2850 to 2800 BCE. 50 to 100 years from now. Assembly of all immortals and representatives from major human populations. Complete confession, genetic modification, climate manipulation, technological intervention, all of it. Documentation provided, Ether's vaults opened, Erebus's archives revealed, complete evidence rather than fragmentary admission. Partnership proposal presented simultaneously with confession. Not will continue guiding you, we'll work together as equals. Hybrid governance councils. Immortals and humans make decisions jointly. Enhanced and baseline humans are both represented. Legal frameworks preventing biological aristocracy. Economic structures preventing resource monopolization. Institutional safeguards against both immortal control and enhanced human domination. She showed the probability branches. Initial human response, 18% hostile, actively attacking immortals. 59% are willing to negotiate if the confession is complete and the partnership is genuine. 23% uncertain, evaluating evidence. The hostile 18% is a problem, they'll attempt violence, but if we respond with restraint rather than overwhelming force, and if we accept judgment instead of defending ourselves aggressively, the uncertain 23% shifts toward cooperation. Eventually, the hostile minority becomes isolated and manageable rather than leading a rebellion. What about the enhanced bloodlines? Talia asked. They have the most to lose from a partnership. They're biologically superior, socially dominant. Why would they accept equality? Because the alternative is worse. Nix showed projections of enhanced baseline conflict. If speciation continues without partnership governance, enhanced bloodlines face 2 options: permanent domination that requires constant violence to maintain, or eventual extinction when baseline humans develop technologies that negate biological advantages. Both options are terrible. Partnership is a compromise. Enhanced bloodlines give up dominance in exchange for survival and cooperation. It's a sacrifice, but a rational sacrifice. And critically, she added, enhanced humans like Gilgamesh understand this. The smart ones recognize that domination is unsustainable. They're already questioning the pattern. Already uncomfortable with their advantages. We are already looking for an alternative to either dominating or being dominated. Partnership offers that alternative. Prometheus studied the projections carefully. What makes this work? What's the difference between 27% probability and 3% probability? What specific factors tip the balance? 4 elements, Nix highlighted them. First, timing. Revelation before human discovery, but after humans have developed enough to understand context. It's too early, and they can't comprehend what we're telling them. Too late, and discovery precedes revelation. The window is approximately 2850 to 2750 BCE. We're at the beginning of that window now. Second, completeness. Full confession, all evidence, no hidden reserves. Humans must believe they have complete information. Any suggestion that we're still concealing something produces suspicion, which undermines the partnership. Ether's vaults open completely. Erebus's archives made accessible. My probability models are shared. Everything. Third, institutional structure. Partnership must be real, not performance. Humans need actual decision-making power. Votes must matter. Immortal advice can be given but not imposed. Enhanced bloodlines must accept legal constraints on their advantages. Baseline humans must have guaranteed representation. The structure must enforce equality that biology doesn't provide. Fourth, Lyra. Nyx returned to projections centered on Talia's daughter. She's the bridge. The voice that neither species can dismiss. The being who understands both perspectives and refuses to let either side retreat into comfortable lies. In successful scenarios, she forces immortals to maintain honesty when it's easier to conceal their true selves. Forces humans to maintain cooperation when it's easier to fragment. Forces enhanced bloodlines to accept equality when it's easier to dominate. Without her specific intervention, the probability drops from 27% to 11%. So we need my 13-year-old daughter to save both species from catastrophe, Talia said with bitter recognition. That's our best plan. Put the burden on a child. She won't be a child when revelation comes, Nyx replied gently. In successful scenarios, revelation happens when she's 15 to 17. Old enough to understand. Young enough not to be corrupted by our patterns. And critically, she'll choose this role. The projections where we force her participation fail. The projections where she volunteers succeed. She needs to want to be the bridge. That's what makes her effective. Enoch's insertion. There's one more element, Nyx said, pulling up documentation separate from the probability models. Insurance. In case we're too cowardly to reveal ourselves voluntarily. In case we wait too long, humans may discover the truth without our guidance. In case the 27% scenario fails and we need future humans to have complete context. She activated the quantum link to the Mesopotamian region. I've been collaborating with a human. Enhanced bloodline, age 55, exceptional cognitive capabilities even by enhanced standards. His name is Enoch. For 40 years, he's been documenting our intervention. They are creating encoded historical records disguised as religious prophecy. Books that will survive as sacred texts for thousands of years, protected, copied, transmitted across millennia. And eventually, when humans develop sufficient understanding, it is decoded as actual history rather than divine revelation. Through the network, Enoch's presence materialized in the quantum chamber, not physically, but his consciousness linked through Nyx's technology, unaware that 5,000 immortal minds were observing him. Show them, Nyx instructed. Enoch was in his study in a settlement near the rivers, working by lamplight. Clay tablets surrounded him, each one covered in dense script. Through Nyx's quantum sensing, the immortals could read what he was writing, history rendered as prophecy, genetic modification encoded as divine intervention, climate manipulation disguised as God's judgment, enhancement programs described as angels mating with humans. The Book of the Watchers documented who we are, Nyx narrated. 200 Watchers, his encoding for our population when he began. Descending on Mount Hermon, the orbital platform he's observed. Teaching forbidden knowledge, everything we've taught. Creating Nephilim, enhanced bloodlines from immortal human collaboration. The astronomical book encoded our science, 50,000 years of celestial observations rendered as a divine calendar. Orbital mechanics are described as the gates of heaven. Quantum communication is portrayed as angelic messengers, technical precision hidden under religious language. Future astronomers with sufficient knowledge will read his calculations and realize they're too accurate for a Bronze Age prophet. They'll start asking questions. And now, she showed his current work, the Book of Dream Visions. The complete history of our intervention is encoded as apocalyptic animal symbolism, with stars representing immortals. Bulls, cows, and sheep represent different human populations, elephants, camels, and asses represent enhanced bloodlines. Shepherds managing flocks representing our guidance programs. The entire 50,000 years from our homeworld destruction through Earth arrival through current crisis, all disguised as bizarre prophetic vision. The immortals watched Enoch work, his enhanced mind processing information at speeds that would astonish baseline humans but seem slow to immortal consciousness. He was encoding the trigger points. The resource wars. The technology cascade. The speciation crisis. The environmental collapse. All of it was rendered as a prophetic warning about future judgment and tribulation. He understands what he's documenting, Prometheus observed. He knows this is actual history, not prophecy. He knows completely. I've shown him everything, the vaults, the technology, the probability models, the complete truth. Nyx pulled Enoch's consciousness back to present reality, letting him continue working while disconnecting the observation link. He's creating a time capsule. This documentation will survive as a religious text but will eventually be recognized as a historical record. When revelation comes, whether through our choice or human discovery, his books provide complete context. How long until decoding? Ether asked. My projections suggest approximately 2000 CE, 3000 years from now. Someone with astronomical training, historical knowledge, pattern recognition, and a willingness to question religious assumptions will read his astronomical book. We'll run the calculations. We'll realize they're too accurate. We'll start investigating other books. We'll recognize the pattern. We'll decode the entire body of work and understand it as encoded historical documentation. And then revelation begins whether we want it or not, Erebus noted with something like satisfaction. Human intelligence finds truth despite our concealment. Appropriate. Exactly. Enoch's books are an insurance policy. If we choose the 27% scenario and reveal ourselves honestly, his documentation provides supporting evidence and context. If we're cowards who wait too long, his documentation ensures truth eventually emerges anyway. Either path, humanity gets complete information. Nyx deactivated the displays. So those are our options. Continue current trajectory towards 61% catastrophe probability. Attempt withdrawal or increased control, both producing worse outcomes. Or attempt early revelation with partnership, producing 27% catastrophe probability with Lyra as bridge and Enoch's documentation as insurance. 27% still means 3 to 1 odds we fail, Chronos said grimly. Yes. But that's better than our other options. And it's an honest assessment rather than a comfortable delusion. Nyx met the strategic leader's eyes. We can't guarantee success. We can only choose the path with the best probability and commit fully to making it work. 27% is our best chance. The question is whether we're brave enough to take it. The animal apocalypse. 50 kilometers away from the quantum chamber where 5,000 immortals debated their species' future, Enoch continued his work, unaware of the observation that had just concluded. The encoding was flowing now, his enhanced mind processing connections faster than his hands could write. 50,000 years of history compressed into a symbolic narrative that would seem religious to casual readers but reveal itself as documentation to careful analysts with sufficient context. The homeworld crisis. Stars falling from heaven. Angels weeping. God withdrawing his presence. Enoch encoded the civilization's collapse through solar instability, translating technical catastrophe into mythological language. The journey to Earth. Angels descending. Taking new forms. Seeking refuge among sheep. The refugee fleet, the biomass conversion, the arrival on planet with primitive humans who knew nothing of stellar civilizations. The debate about intervention. Some angels want to return to heaven. Others want to remain. Disagreement among the fallen. The council sessions, the policy arguments, and the division between those who wanted withdrawal and those who advocated guidance were significant topics of discussion. The decision to help. 200 watchers descending on Mount Hermon. Choosing to teach the children of men. Revealing forbidden knowledge. Immortals committing to intervention despite knowing the risks, despite remembering their own civilization's catastrophe, despite uncertainty about outcomes. The enhancement programs. Watchers mating with human women. Producing Nephilim. Giants who dominated the earth. Genetic modification is encoded as a reproductive union, enhanced bloodlines disguised as hybrid offspring, and biological aristocracy rendered as literal giants. The Younger Dryas catastrophe. Cold and darkness. Death spreading. But one white bull, Noah, preserved. Enoch encoded climate catastrophe as divine judgment, salvation through selection. The agricultural revolution. Climate manipulation is succeeding this time. Humans settling. Cities forming. Bronze working is spreading. Civilization is accelerating under immortal guidance. Sheep multiplying. Fields growing. Cities rising under shepherd guidance. The encoding flowed faster now, decades of history compressed into verses, symbolic animals replacing human populations. The Enhancement Project. 47 bloodlines. Talia's modifications created advantages that bred true. Enhanced and baseline humans diverging. The same pattern that destroyed the immortal homeworld was recreated on Earth. Stars mating with cows. Producing elephants, camels, asses, giants who dominated normal animals. Enoch wrote the Nephilim not as physical giants but as a genetic superiority. Enhanced humans were symbolized as different species because, functionally, they were becoming different species. The expansion. Cities spreading. Technology advancing. Writing, mathematics, astronomy, all taught by immortals. All accelerated beyond the natural development pace. 40,000 years of progress compressed into 6 millennia. 70 shepherds assigned to 70 nations. Recording their deeds. Judging their management. Enoch encoded the immortal coordination network, each shepherd representing one watcher assigned to human populations. The warning signs. Human scholars documenting inconsistencies. The questioners are forming. Damon is confronting Nyx. Revelation is approaching inevitably. Shepherds failing in their duty. Some are killing sheep. Some neglecting flocks. Some serve themselves rather than charges. The encoding captured the immortal division, their competing philosophies, and their inability to maintain a unified purpose. Hours passed. Clay tablets accumulated. Enoch's enhanced mind processed data faster than baseline humans could perceive, but even he struggled with the scope. 50,000 years. Countless interventions. The complete record of immortal manipulation is rendered as bizarre animal symbolism. Why animals? Enoch had asked during a previous session with Nyx. Because humans understand animal hierarchies, she'd explained. Predator and prey. Shepherd and flock. Breeding and selection. The metaphors are visceral enough to survive translation, abstract enough to hide technical details. And because calling human sheep is humiliating enough, people will assume it's a religious metaphor rather than actual history. Nobody will believe this is a literal documentation of genetic modification and population management. Which means they'll preserve it. Until someone smart enough to decode it. Until someone smart enough and brave enough to recognize that prophetic animal visions might be encoded historical records. That person exists in about 14% of future scenarios. It usually appears around 2000 CE, 3,000 years from now. Enhanced cognition, pattern recognition, and willingness to question religious assumptions. They'll read your animal apocalypse and realize you were describing actual events. Now Enoch encoded the final sections. The coming triggers. The resource wars. The technological cascade. The genetic divergence. The environmental crisis. All of it rendered as an apocalyptic vision, a prophecy that was actually a probability projection. The final judgment. Shepherds called to account. Sheep are crying out for justice. New house built, sustainable civilization or catastrophic collapse, depending on choices not yet made. You're creating a warning, he said to himself, understanding fully what Nyx had commissioned. Not just history. Encoding the trigger points. Showing future humans what we're facing. Giving them information to make better choices. He worked through the night, his enhanced endurance allowing him to maintain focus that would exhaust baseline humans. By dawn, he had created 50 clay tablets documenting 50,000 years of history, all encoded as prophetic vision about animals and shepherds, giants and floods, judgment and salvation. The Book of Dream Visions, he said, surveying his work. Complete record of immortal intervention encoded as bizarre apocalyptic prophecy. Hidden in plain sight. The distribution. 3 weeks later, Nix found Enoch in his settlement, teaching young scholars the astronomical calculations he'd encoded in his earlier books. The tablets are distributed, he reported. 7 primary copies in major temple archives. 43 secondary copies in private collections. Hundreds of fragments are in circulation. The Book of the Watchers, the Astronomical Book, and now the Book of Dream Visions, all spreading through networks that ensure survival. And the scholars. Nix gestured at the students studying his astronomical texts. They think they're learning divine revelation. Sacred mathematics. God's calendar system. Enoch's expression held ironic amusement. They don't realize they're studying immortal science encoded as prophecy. They're preserving your technology while thinking they're preserving religious mystery. Perfect. Religion protects what authority fears. Your encoding ensures survival through piety. Though eventually, someone will decode it. Recognize the science under the prophecy. Realize that celestial mechanics described in my astronomical book matches observations too perfectly to be divine guesswork. In about 2000 CE, if the projections hold, someone with astronomical training and historical curiosity will read your book, run the calculations, and realize you were documenting actual orbital mechanics. Then they'll wonder how a Bronze Age prophet knew things that required advanced mathematics to discover. Nix's eyes held distant calculation. That's when the questions begin. And questions lead to investigation. And investigation leads to discovery of other evidence, the vaults, the questioner's records, your other books. Cascade of revelation through accumulated evidence. Enoch watched his students work, preserving knowledge they didn't understand, protecting truth by thinking it was a mystery. It's strange. I'm documenting actual history, but it's only useful as history if people think it's prophecy. The moment they treat it as history, authorities might destroy it. But as long as it's religious text, it's protected. That's the genius of encoding. Truth survives through strategic misunderstanding. Nix was prepared to leave. The final books, parables and epistle, can wait. You've done the critical work. Given future humans complete historical context. Now live. Enjoy your remaining years. You've earned rest. How many years? Your enhancement project's 240 more. You'll live to 295. Longer than almost any human before you. Long enough to see your books become religious texts. Long enough to know they'll survive. But not long enough to see them decoded. No. That's 3,000 years away. You'll die thinking your work was prophecy. Your descendants will preserve it as a mystery. And eventually, someone in the far future will realize you were just recording what you saw, encoding truth for the generation wise enough to recognize it. Enoch accepted this with the equanimity of someone who'd spent 40 years working on projects he'd never see completed. Then I'll trust them. The future humans who'll decode my words. I'll trust they'll be wise enough to use the information well. That's all we can do. Create the best foundation we can. Preserve complete information. Then trust the next generation to build something better than we managed. Nix touched his shoulder briefly, a rare gesture of physical contact from an immortal. Thank you, Enoch, for 40 years of collaboration. This is for documentation that will outlive both our civilizations. For being brave enough to encode truth when it is easier to accept comfortable lies. She left through the quantum relay, returning to her endless calculations, her probability projections, her attempts to determine whether the future held catastrophe or sustainability. Behind her, Enoch returned to teaching students who believed they were learning about God's design. In reality, they were studying immortal engineering, preserving science through religion, and protecting truth through mystery. The books were distributed. The encoding was complete. The future was uncertain. At least when revelation came, humanity would have complete information. 27% chance of success. If they were wise enough to use it well. End of chapter 23. Next, chapter 24, the First Council, 2850 BCE, Revelation begins. Lyra forces honesty. Partnership is proposed. The foundation is built. There is a 61% probability of catastrophic collapse within 3,000 years. 5 trigger points approaching: enhanced power consolidation, resource wars, technology cascade peak, speciation completion, and environmental crisis. Each one is a potential extinction event for both species. But there's an alternative. Early revelation with genuine partnership, 27% collapse probability. Still terrible odds. 1 in 4 timelines ends in catastrophe. But better than 3 in 5. The data is undeniable. The mathematics are clear. Current trajectory leads to probable destruction. Partnership offers better odds. Not good odds, just better ones. Nix calls for the full council, emergency session. Complete attendance is mandatory. They need to decide, maintain comfortable deception with 61% collapse probability, or risk honest revelation with 27% collapse probability. In Chapter 24, 150,000 humans gather in the Himalayan valleys. Immortals, enhanced humans, baseline humans, 3 groups who've never spoken honestly. Today, the lies end. The complete truth is revealed. And both species vote on whether a partnership is possible. The foundation for the next 3,000 years is decided in Chapter 24. That's Chapter 23 of the First Awakening. 61% failure. Would you take those odds? Comments open. This is AI Narratives and Tales. Everything culminates in Chapter 24.